Well, I think we should go ahead and get started. For those of us on the East Coast, happy snow day. I'm glad that you're still joining us today and not deciding to just wrap yourself in a warm weighted blanket with a special beverage watching Netflix. We're so glad to have you with us today. I'm Donna Riccobono. I'm project director of Connections Beyond Sight and Sound, which is the Maryland and DC Deafblind project.
I think it is.
I just wanted to remind you that this is part one of a three-part series. So it will happen again next Tuesday and the Tuesday after this from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I'd like to just introduce my team. I have Jen Willis is with us. She is the project coordinator. We have Rebecca Hammer, who is an educational specialist, and we have Jennifer Stepanek, educational specialist. And I don't want to forget to thank our interpreters for today, because we get off at the end and I always forget to thank our very special interpreters, Anna and Melissa. So for those of you who are new to us in our webinar series, feel free to ask any question.
Yeah, I missed it because I knew I signed up for it a while ago, and then I don't know that I got it on my calendar very well.
As we go on, can you please mute your screen? Make sure you're muted during the presentation. Okay, as I was saying, this is a three-part series. And today we have one of my personal favorite humans today presenting for us. We have Mr. Chris Montgomery here with us today, and we're so glad to have you from Austin, Texas. So Chris has been in the field of deafblind education and visual impairment since 1996. He's been a classroom teacher. He's been part of the Deafblind Project in Texas. He's well-written and well-spoken. He's done many presentations. He's created the informal functional hearing evaluation, and he's led the development of Texas educator standards for teacher of the deafblind. And he holds a master's degree in special ed and is a certified teacher of the visually impaired. And he's going to be with us for the next 3 Tuesdays. And this series is going to focus on teaching strategies for learners with deafblindness. These strategies can also be applied to students who are blind or visually impaired with additional impairments. Topics covered will include experiencing the world through the sense of touch, how to initiate interaction, share meaningful experiences, so hopefully create formal language with learners who are deafblind.
And fall then this morning.
Classroom strategies for developing and evaluating calendars and functional routines that work together to form a holistic system of communication and literacy will also be discussed. And I don't want to spend too much time just telling you that Chris Montgomery really is a skilled professional who has also enlightened me on topics. I've attended many of his trainings as well throughout the years. We've known each other for about 20 years. So I'm biased. I think he's exquisite and he has a lot to offer us today. Again, if there's any questions in the chat about if you need to spotlight or we need to pin you so you can see the interpreter or anything like that, please let us know. We can help with that. And if there's any questions about the session itself, or we're not going to do an evaluation till the end of the third session. So we don't have to worry about that. And if there's anything, or if there's questions for Chris during the presentation, feel free to put it in the chat and we will go ahead and recite it to him. All right, Chris, without further ado, feel free to take it away.
Wow, that's a heck of an introduction. Thank you, Donna. I heard that there are 223 or something like that. I will reinforce this announcement that Donna just made. Please mute your microphones so that you're not bleeding over into everybody else. However, with that being said, I would love for this to be more of an interactive conversation today. So if you do have something that you'd like to share, please feel free to do that. you can put message in chat, question or comment over in chat, or if you'd like to, just kind of interrupt, I guess. That's kind of the only way to do that on Zoom. It's kind of a great thing because from what I understand, we have people from all over the world. We have somebody in Egypt, somebody in Australia, maybe. I saw a couple of my friends from the Nordic countries. Looks like are tuned in. That is super cool. So Zoom's great, but it's also a little bit hard to have a conversation. So having said that, yes. Oh, Brazil, Laura, um, all over the place, all over the world. So, whatever time zone you're in, I hope you're enjoying your coffee, your adult beverage, however your day might slide here. I know Donna sent out a flyer with my bio, and she kind of gave you a little bit more background on me. But in case you don't know or weren't able to read up ahead of time, I spent a lot of my adult years at Texas School for the Blind here in Austin, and that's where I'm beaming into you from today. I started out as a classroom TA, a teaching assistant, because we didn't have interveners then. And then I became a classroom teacher and later a teacher of the visually impaired. And then eventually I started working for the Texas Outreach Department, which was the Deaf-Blind project there. And I did that for a long time. And eventually, a couple years ago, I went to Perkins to be their director of education, stayed there for just a little while, and now I'm back in Texas. All of that being said, I did start when I was about 12 years old. So, just saying, I'm still a youngster. I'm curious. So put stuff up in chat if you would. I've introduced myself, but maybe that we've got a lot of people on here and we'll do what we can. But I'm curious to know what your experience is and what you hope to get out of today's discussion. Again, I'm going to ask you guys to participate. This is a two-way street. So Zoom is weird. It might be a little bit hard. It's got its pluses and minuses, but as we can, I'd really love to have questions and comments from you all. So I think Donna is going to throw up a little chat question for you. Again, if you don't have a question or comment, though, please do mute your microphone. Okay, for those of you who've maybe seen me present before, some of this might be familiar today. Hopefully some of it is maybe new. For those of you who haven't, might be a little bit different sort of presentation. I'm going to start out with just a little bit of a further introduction here, and let's take a look at this picture. If you don't know, this is Helen Keller and Charlie Chaplin, and legend has it that this is the first time they ever met. This is a movie set in Hollywood. I can't remember what year, but it's the early 30s if I'm in the ballpark there. And as you can see, they're gazing at each other. This is the first time they met. And I'm sure you all know that Helen is deaf-blind. So why on earth would I say she's gazing at Charlie? Gazing is something that people do who have vision, right? But Helen is gazing at Charlie tactually. She's got her hand on Charlie's face. And this is really like the first thing people do when they meet each other. They look at each other, they gaze at each other, they get that quick sort of visual assessment. Is this a friendly person? Are they safe? Does this person look like somebody I'd like to know or maybe not? Bigger question, do they show interest in me? Are they smiling at me? Which helps us all as we mirror each other. helps us determine, is this person a friend? Are they welcoming? You know, what's their body posture? What's their facial expression? And if you can look even closer, go with me here, look really at Helen's hand shape, how she's got her fingers, some of them right on Charlie's lips, some of them are more on his throat down here. And so she's gathering all this information, all the stuff we get in that moment's glance, that incidental, like, boom, we just got it, quick look. She's getting that with her fingers. If Charlie says something, she's going to be able to feel that resonance, that vibration in his throat. She's going to be able to read his lips with her fingers. And Charlie's smiling. He is, in fact, saying that I am a friendly guy and it's nice to meet you. And if you look there, you can see that Helen is also smiling. So just with that touch, those fingers on Charlie's face, and Charlie must have been a pretty cool guy, I might add, because he seems very comfortable here. If us who have vision can tell, he's very relaxed, and he's letting Helen do all this. He's letting Helen put her fingers on his face. But Helen's smiling back. She is returning that gaze and that gesture of, I'm also friendly and I appreciate this introduction, right? So all this stuff that's happening here tactually that Helen's getting, this is stuff that we get in that moment. We don't really have to work at it. We get all that information very quickly and easily through our vision. And so what does all this mean for a person who's congenitally deafblind? Are we adults, in effect, speaking a foreign language to them? If their experience of the world is tactile or mostly tactile, shouldn't we be adjusting our language to their tactile perspective? How are we telling them that we know? How are we letting them know that we're listening? How are we letting them know that we're interested in and will take time to respond to their topics? And how are we letting them know that we're smiling? If we're not giving them tactile access, if we're not giving them access to our bodily and facial expression. So all of this stuff, right, just captured in this one shot. I'm going to look over here at okay, lots of people have introduced themselves. From the UK, got SLPs.
And Chris, you just tell me if there's something I can do for you, Chris. Just let me know. And then also when you're ready for the first poll, you could just cue me and I'll put it up. But if there's anything I can do for you, there's a lot of people in the chat too.
Okay. If there's any questions that you see, let me know.
Okay.
As Donna said, this is going to be a 3-part series. So today we're going to be talking mostly about this tactile bodily social interaction communication language thing. A week from now, we'll talk a little bit more about developing functional routines. I'm going to talk a little bit about embodied cognition during that, not too deeply. And then our last one, we'll talk about designing calendars, systems of literacy, but also about storytelling and how important that is for us as human beings to be able to tell our story. And if we don't have a system of literacy, something to record that with, how hard that is to do. This is something that I grabbed from some friends of mine. And I think it's really important to put this up. And I'm just going to read this. I don't usually read the slides, but this one I'm going to read. And it says, people who are deafblind are skilled at many things, but we may fail to notice this when we focus on the problems and challenges instead of recognizing the qualities and potentials of each individual. So we should not view being deafblind as a negative state of being in which sight and hearing are not there, but instead as a positive state in which active touch, bodily movements, postures, hand gestures. Whoops. are the preeminent source of information. And I think this is just a very important thing to keep in mind, this ability versus disability thing. Just wanting to bring this up before we go much further. It's just so important that we acknowledge this incredible tactile bodily ability of individuals who are congenitally deafblind, that we shift our perspective to recognizing how congenitally deafblind individuals experience the world, and in turn how they express themselves. Because I think this is the foundation to becoming a competent and empathetic communication partner. So again, today might be a little bit different. Here's a question that I'm just going to pose. I don't have a good answer for this, but I really hope that it is to prompt further discussion, inspire thought and reflection and curiosity. This idea of being curious and brave and creative so that we can really be the best interaction partners for our students as possible. I just think it's really important for us to not let our sort of preconceived assumptions betray us into thinking that something's not possible. So think back to Charlie letting Helen see him smile. Okay. I have to press some buttons here. I got this idea from a friend of mine, Hella Buland. I saw her do a thing where she peeled an orange. And so this is from Hella via Chris. Just want to ask, so would you throw up this chat question, Donna? So imagine that you don't, whoops. So if I ask you, what do you call this?
Pressing.
What do you call this?
Pressing.
Anybody?
Pressing.
An orange, okay. So why do you call it an orange? And I'm just going to kind of ask this rhetorically. Is it because of its color? And if so, how did you learn the word for that color? How did you know that you could eat it? We probably know that it's fruit, right? It's called an orange. We can eat it. We can make juice from it. How did we learn these things? We may know that it grows on trees. But if you're from a place that's cold, like Maryland, how in the world do you know that it grows on trees? How many people have ever seen like a grove of orange trees? So all these things, like, how did we get this information? How did it happen? If I asked everyone to close their eyes and imagine a delicious orange, most of us could easily have a mental image of an orange. It's a visual image, right? Of this thing, this orange, because it's orange. Maybe we could see also like a row of oranges in the supermarket when we go to shop with all the other oranges. Maybe your orange would be small, like a little tangerine. Or maybe it would be a great big giant navel orange or something. You know, there's all kinds of oranges too. And we have this mental image of that. Now, what if I asked you, though, to describe an orange without using visual language? Only tactile language. How would you describe an orange? I'm going to see if anybody throws anything in the chat.
And we have learned through experience, either direct or being told over and over.
Yeah.
Or we have used our many senses, seeing, hearing, someone telling us, the feel of it, and the smell.
Yep. Probably had adults when we were kids, like telling us all this stuff too, right? Sort of like we had somebody that we learned from. Now, how would you describe this though, without using any sort of visual language? Okay. Touchable, squeezable, squishy. This orange is like very ripe. It is very kind of squishy, round, waxy, kind of bumpy, smooth with dimples. Yep. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So maybe we would also use things like, what's the temperature of it? You know, this orange I just got out of the refrigerator. It's a little cold. Does it bounce? What's it like if I hit myself in the head with it? Can I squeeze it? Does it roll? What happens if I drop it on the floor? Does it bounce back? All these sort of properties that maybe we don't immediately think of as properties of an orange. I know for me, I usually have like this, like it's on the screen. So if we're trying to teach a deafblind person who can't see, doesn't have visual access to an orange, what kind of language, what kind of an experience are we going to use to teach them that language? And if I peel this orange, I've got something really different here. I've got these peelings and I've got this little thing that was kind of got smaller, and it's very sticky and it's very juicy. Has really smells amazing. But what do we call this? Is this still an orange? Or do we have to develop different language for this? So somebody's saying experience this using their hands as their eyes. Absolutely. If I just gave a person who was deafblind like that orange that wasn't peeled and said, this is an orange, and then handed them this and said, this is an orange, it'd be like, what? That's not true. So what I would be doing to describe this, I think, is using, what was it like to kind of pull that peeling off of there, you know, using gestures like this, or if I'm peeling here, what's it like to pull this apart? Maybe I got squirted in the face with it or something like that. So, oh my God, you know, what was that? And the smell of that, you know. So I'm gonna use a different kind of language, a language that's accessible, that has shared meaning. So while I'm doing that, I'm naming as I'm going, but I'm not using seeing words, seeing language. I'm using the tactile language of the actual event and the experience of peeling that orange. So we're going to see in just a minute a man who's deaf and listens to music. And in fact, he's an audiophile. Does anybody know what an audiophile is? An audiophile, if you didn't know, is a person who's like, they love music usually, but they also are like really into their stereo. And there have been the guy's name's Bob, and he's also happens to be a deadhead, which a deadhead is a person who loves the Grateful Dead, the band. Hope everybody knows who that is. But there have been some really interesting studies that are coming out now using MRI imaging, imaging of the brain to show how the visual and auditory cortex can recognize or reorganize and repurpose to become to be used by our somatosensory system. And that somatosensory, by the way, is our body's sense of touch, not just our hands, but our whole nervous system, our whole tactile nervous system. And so I think this is really interesting to think about as we experience something like peeling the orange. What is that tactile bodily imprint or image of the orange? The act of peeling it bodily, tactually. What is it like to feel that stickiness, to have that movement within our fingers? All of that stuff, how does our brain sort of activate with regards to that, especially if you have limited vision and hearing? So anyway, I'm gonna play this. Does anybody have any comments? People can see colors based on music. I love it. Yes, absolutely. I'm a musician and I'm like, okay, but I have friends who are amazing and they will sometimes describe music in colors. I think that's a really, really beautiful observation. So this is Bob, the Deadhead, and I'm going to go ahead and play this video. We're going to have a lot of video today, by the by. So if there are any comments after we watch it, don't hesitate.
Running stream turns the water wheel, which turns the grindstone to mill the wheat. Sound waves enter our ear canal, strike our eardrum, and the vibrations are interpreted as sound by our brain. But there is another way.
My name is Bob Lichtenberg. I'm deaf, and I enjoy music. I became deaf when I was 5. It was really gradual. By the time I was 8, I wasn't able to really hear people talking anymore. I think I do remember becoming deaf. So when a bird was singing, my friend had told me, "Can you hear that?" I said, "Just barely." And that's really the last time I remember hearing music.
A deaf person shouldn't be able to hear music, but they can. Sound is vibrational information, and the body has ways of sensing this information other than the ears. Hands are particularly adept at this, and it's been found that the brain can rewire its auditory cortex to receive input from the mechanoreceptors in the fingertips instead of the auditory nerve coming from the ear. Bob uses a mylar balloon to gather the musical vibrations in the air of the room and focus them at his fingertips, like what our eardrum does for our inner ear.
Many deaf people use the balloon. What I discovered was that mylar and helium, which is a better kind of balloon than latex and oxygen, is just a lot more sensitive to vibrations. I've always been listening to music with a speaker, a small speaker, but I was always twirling it on my ears. And I realized later on it was similar to feeling a balloon. But over the years, it just became a point where my brain was, actually here, something really close. But it wasn't close enough, but loud enough. And I'd be feeling it. My brain was just picking it up as if I was actually hanging really close to me. And so I've adapted to the point where if I don't use the balloon, I can't hear anything. But if I pick up the balloon, music's very clear to me. So my hands are basically mapping to my brain what the ears do. There have been some studies in other deaf people in Europe who were born deaf who listen with music with the balloon. They would find out their auditory cortex is still functional. They're basically hearing. It's just a different pathway, same mechanics.
Bob claims his method of listening is limited, and that his balloon doesn't pass on as much detail as a listener might receive through their ears. That may be true, but he is so focused when he listens that he can tell which cable has been swapped in a stereo system by listening alone far more reliably than most audiophiles.
And that takes a lot of guesswork involved in listening with the balloon, because there's a lot of detail that I'm been able to hear. And so I'm trying to figure out in my mind, what are they playing to? What's the dead? I know Jerry's going to go this way. And then Bob's going to try to pick up and play along with him. And they want to go this way. And so I'm listening to particular people playing. Because it's really an emotional thing for me. I remember the first time a friend of mine played the guitar with headphones. I was going, wow, hearing people hear this. He's amazing how beautiful it was.
In the vast nebulous darkness that was 2020, there is a specific
So I wonder if anybody has any comments about that, anything they'd like to share, questions. I find it amazing, and I wonder if the auditory cortex can be sort of remapped or repurposed to our sense of touch, to our tactile bodily sense. I wonder, might it also be true that our bodies are always synthesizing all of this tactile sensory information through all the cortexes of the brain, but if the language that we use to describe and remember our experiences is really more of a visual language, or it is a visual language, are we as aware and present in those experiences from that tactile bodily perspective? So is our tactile bodily sense, it may not be our kind of go-to for remembering and for language. Is it more of like a visual image, like with the orange? Says, wow, my son holds a balloon like that as if he was listening. That was from Joanne, yes. Maybe he is, right? I don't know your son, but you have to wonder. There's lots of information. That's a very cool thing to try if anybody would like to do this. I've set it up to where people have a partner and they share a balloon, earplugs, occluders, and talk so that your mouth is on or close to the balloon. There's a lot of information you can pick up. Another very large takeaway from this video is that how emotional he is, and music to me is emotion. It's good music, that's really a powerful emotional thing, right? It kind of gives meaning to life, so to speak, and it certainly seems to for Bob. So, how do we share that musical moment, that life's emotion, with the learner who is deafblind? How do we give life its juice, its meaning, that emotional content? And Brittany says, I have been trying to understand this for a long time. My son, who's hearing impaired, loves music and sound and vibration by putting, yeah, absolutely. Brittany, I wonder if you've ever let him rest his head like against your chest or against your head, because there's a lot of resonance there too. So the poll question, I don't know if Donna put it up, is what does this video tell us about Bob and about the human tactile bodily abilities? How might this apply to our kids who are deafblind? And so for me, the question is, how do we, seeing, hearing people whose language is so deeply based in visual imagery and visual concepts, adjust ourselves to the experience of the world that is our kids who may not have that visual auditory access, who may be tactile bodily based? How do we develop a deeper understanding of that perspective? How do we enter into that conversation that's going to enable us to co-create meaning and shared language? And how do we co-create and create meaningful shared language from that tactile bodily perspective? So I'm giving you guys lots of questions and not a lot of answers, right? Hopefully, again, this is all about getting curious. I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn here and let's just talk about touch. Could have a whole day just talking about touch in the tactile bodily sense, but we're limited. So I'm just going to just talk a little bit. And, I will say, I think touch is a very intimate sense. Unlike vision and hearing, you need to be close. because touch is not a distal sense. And I think it's safe to say that most of us probably say that we're uncomfortable when an unfamiliar or uninvited person touches us. And I wonder if anybody's had the experience of having somebody who maybe you didn't quite feel like you knew well enough give you a hug. Kind of, wait, what's happening here? Like, what are you doing moment, right? The other layer of this is that different cultures are more open to touch than others. There might be a different sense of personal space. I know here in America, we're somewhat, I feel like, adverse to touch. We put our little dividers there, like, I was at the grocery yesterday, gearing up for the big storm that came to Austin. I'm in the checkout line at the grocery, and I'm noticing that I have the guy in front of me puts his little divider there on the conveyor belt with the groceries. Like, I don't want your groceries touching mine. I'm putting this barrier here. All of these little things, it's kind of like, don't get too close. I can remember this time we were having our big Texas Deafblind Symposium, and it was after things were done for the day and we were wrapping up, and we're standing in this great big room, right? This sort of ballroom. And it was me and a bunch of my European friends, and sort of a semicircle. There's Chris and there's like 3 other people. And we're talking, and they kept taking a step towards me. And at first I didn't really think about it, but I was taking a step back. And then they'd take a step for me as a group. And I'm like, pretty soon I'm like, hey, y'all back off, personal space. So, just this cultural difference in my personal space, which I think tends to be kind of arm's length, where, maybe one of our European friends can chime in on this, but maybe that cultural perspective is arm's length, but I'm going to kind of come back about 6 inches or 6 or 12 inches. So just that little bit of thing can be profoundly different for people. And so what does this have to do with our kids? So we adults, we need to be culturally aware when we're offering touch, and we'll have to be age appropriate, like, no 20-year-olds in our laps, please. But we also need to establish a good practice of appropriate touch and tactile communication. So we have to give our kids access to us. And that access is going to be tactile. It's going to be through touch. We need to think about our proximity. Do things like our knees need to be touching if we're having a conversation, for instance? It's not just always about our hands either. I see some people laughing, boundaries, ha ha ha, yeah. So this is a story, maybe if you've heard me talk before, I'm going to tell this little story that I've told before. I used to have a coworker named Matt, and this was when I was at TSBVI, and we were on the deafblind team. And Matt, this is a few years ago. Matt was a really good, close colleague of mine. And Matt had just become a father. And his little baby boy, Weston, was at home. Weston was safe and healthy. And most mornings, Matt would come in to work, and he'd be all excited about what the latest thing that baby Weston had done. This sort of new little human being that he had at home now. And it just so happened that during this time, we were also starting to really explore and learn more about social interaction as it applies to a person who's congenitally deafblind, and all that wondering and curiosity that we had at the time. And so one morning, Matt came in and he told us about this story, or this interaction, I'm sorry, that he had had with his son, Weston. And he was reflecting on how when he held baby Weston in his arms, that they locked gaze, so they looked at each other visually, and they had all that skin-to-skin contact that was happening, right? And I have to also say that Matt is, he's not a very fashion conscious guy, but I like to tell it like he is. You know, you have to embellish the story. So we're going to pretend Matt's very fashion conscious, but he did happen to have this shirt on that was like a Western shirt with like the pearl buttons. Everybody know what those are, I think. And Weston happened to look down at one of Matt's buttons. Matt noticed that visually. And so what did Matt do? He did what most people would do, right? He followed Weston's gaze and he looked down at the button and he said, "Oh, you're looking at my button." So he labeled it, he put a name to that thing. And then they went back, they locked gaze again and looked at each other and smiled, exchanged a smile. And then they went on with their googly-eyed, whatever else they were doing that day. So, you know, the reason I'm telling you this story is this sort of very simple and innocuous thing that just seems to happen so natural and easy. Something that we just probably don't think twice about, you know, like, what's the big deal? If you think about this from the perspective of a baby who comes into the world without intact vision and hearing, what might their experience of dad's buttons be? And what might it look like for that baby sharing that moment's gaze, looking into dad's face? What would the mutual attention of dad's shiny button look like? And how might that natural back and forth happen? How would the closure of the smile and maybe the change, we're going to talk about something else, the change in topic happen? So if we kind of visualize that skin-to-skin contact and the information that's being shared through that tactile bodily sense, the syncing of heartbeats, maybe the baby brushes the button with its finger, dad notices it and starts to feel it with the baby, and maybe dad labels the button as, "Oh, you're looking at my button," verbally, but then also maybe dad does something else. It's very unique. And he, with the baby, traces around the outside of that button. And so you have that kind of movement, right? And the thing. And so you're labeling it, but you're labeling it tactually in the moment, and you're doing it together. Baby can tell that you're both looking at that button. And so you're kind of creating a language there in the moment, same as with baby Weston. Having that shared emotion, all that stuff kind of goes into it, but it happens in a different way. So I'm going to play you another video. It's video time. Whoop. So this is a little guy, Shanicky Pryor and his dad DJ, and I'm not going to talk much. I'll just play it.
They need to work on that, right? Yes. Okay. Did you understand it though? No. Okay. All right. Oh, not this one. This is grand finale of this one. Yeah, that's the last one. That's what I was wondering. I don't know what they're gonna do next season because they did some stuff this time. Exactly what I was thinking. Oh yeah. Right. Don't break that again. You know what I'm saying? Don't do the same stuff. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I see that. Yeah. Like go somewhere else with that, but don't break it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's what I said. He was like, you know what I'm saying? And I was like, what in the world? Don't do it here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Really? I thought the same thing. We think a lot alike, huh? Oh, that's crazy. Right.
So, evidently that's a popular video. I had no idea. One of my coworkers shared that with me a while ago. I don't know if anybody's maybe seen that, but I think it's really interesting how Dad followed the little baby's topics. They were having this conversation. He was very tuned in to what the little guy was saying. So he was really present in the moment, co-present, we say. And he offered affirmation. And you could say they kind of co-constructed this conversation, kind of putting labels on things as they went. And there was a very clear back and forth, right? I think it was also really cool how he didn't care where the conversation went. So he wasn't trying to like correct what little baby Shanachie was saying to fit his narrative. He was very cool with just going with the flow, so to speak. So you can see on the slide, reciprocal interaction should not be this predetermined response give or back and forth, right? There's no correct necessarily. Yeah, Tracy says, this is my first time seeing the video and I love Dad's engagement. Absolutely. He's present in the moment. They're having a conversation. An old friend of mine had a thing that he said, and I'm going to share it. The friend's name is Gunnar Vig, and I implore you to look him up. He has some amazing things to say. And he always said, the interested person becomes the person of interest. So you can see how Dad was showing real interest in what the little boy was saying and what the little boy was interested in. I wonder if you've ever had that experience of going to a party or something like that maybe and not knowing anybody, but you meet somebody and they listen to what you say and they're interested in what you have to say. They're really interested in your topic. Like I guarantee you the next time you go to a party and that person's there, that's going to be the person that you go over and talk to because they showed interest in you. They were an interested person, so they're going to be the person of interest. And so as we think of all of this, you know, I think it's safe to say that all humans need to interact. It seems to define us. We're social beings. I think we can all reflect on the COVID pandemic and we didn't have very much interaction and that was really hard. It was for me anyway. I need to interact with people. So what would happen if no one answered when we spoke, if we didn't have that person who was interested in our topic and what we were interested in? Nobody returned our smile when we smiled. No one affirmed us. No one acknowledged us. So I'm going to play this video and I have to give a very large disclaimer when I play this. A few years ago, my team and I, my Texas team, we discovered this video and it was quite startling to us. And it really, I think, sent us, it started us on our way down, like, what is this interaction, this conversational thing for students who are congenitally deafblind? And so this is by the Harvard Center for the Developing Child, And they have a great website, by the way, lots of really cool stuff, resources and stuff. But you're going to see a short section here, and it's called the blank face experiment. And this was an experiment that happened, I think it's actually about 20 years ago now. And it's really speaking about toxic stress and neglect. And the disclaimer is I'm absolutely not implying or saying that anybody is neglecting their kids, their students. But what I do like to kind of frame this in the context of is, are our kids communicating to us and we're not noticing? Are they communicating in a way that we're not familiar with because they're not speaking maybe? Are they communicating tactually? And we're not really tuned into that all the time, right? Because we're visual, we're auditory. So I will play the video and we will see what we see.
Everyone in a community has a vested interest in everyone else's children, because everyone else's children determine the next adult population that makes for a successful society. Built into our biology is the need to have responsive interactions with adults.
Neglect for children is when they don't get what the brain is expecting to get, what the child is expecting to get, what we are biologically prepared and waiting for, which is input from those around us.
It's this back and forth serve and return interaction that literally shapes the architecture of the brain.
Serve and return begins when a child looks at something or observes something, makes an utterance, and that represents the serve. And the return is when the parent notices the child doing these things and responds to the child.
Under conditions where serve and return is broken, you literally are pulling away what is the essential ingredient of the development of human brain architecture.
It was a really compelling series of experiments where they started by videotaping the mother and the baby engaging and cooing and smiling. And then they asked the mother to basically put on a blank face and not respond at all. When a baby is not attended to, that is a sign of danger to the baby biologically. So the stress systems become activated.
In a brain that is constantly bathed in stress hormones, not that's up and down, that comes with.
So I put a link to the Harvard site, and I wonder if anybody has any comments that they would like to share from that video that we watched. Again, I think it's just a very interesting context to kind of put this in. You can see from the video, from the research that's being done, how much just basic level stress that can cause not to get the feedback that we're seeking. And then does it become toxic if that goes on for an extended amount of time? And what does that do in turn to our biology? Lots of questions, lots of stuff to think about, right? Oh, thank you, Caroline. Caroline put up a link to Gunnar. And somebody put up 12033 put up, just imagine how multifold it becomes if the students have physical and communication limitations. Yeah, absolutely. Stressful enough, right? So our jobs is to be more present in our interactions, to be more observant, right? Always be there, always show up. Let's shift a little bit and talk. When I say, by the way, when I say interaction. I kind of use that interchangeably, I realize, with conversation. And there's a lot that goes into both. You can break it all down, but really I'm kind of looking at that in the same context, I guess. A conversation is a sustained interaction, a back and forth, that serve and return that they were talking about, where there's a mutually understood message. Something has been transmitted, I receive it, and I'm going to respond back. And both parties are showing up and they're sharing that common mutually understood message. Not that there's not some misunderstandings. There always are. We're human, right? Do you repair those misunderstandings as well as you can?
Chris, would you like that conversation poll launched?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
I see Tracy says, wondering what the lasting effects of this type of stress is on a child. Absolutely. Laura says that there's a theory here in Brazil used for children with no disability where they are expected to explore the world and the teacher and just observe. That's really interesting, Laura. Is that, I wonder, is that part of a curriculum? Is that something that all kids there do? Interesting. So, you guys, thinking back to a conversation that you may have had recently, a good conversation. Actually, it could be years ago, but that good conversation, what made it a good conversation? And if it was something that happened a long time ago, what do you think makes you remember it? You know, was it somebody you really loved and had an emotional bond with? What were the things that you remember? Do you remember that they were listening, that they were really present? Did you feel safe? What else were you doing? Do you remember? Here's one for you. Do you remember what you were wearing? Do you remember any tactile bodily information from that conversation? And I'm looking, yeah, a lot of people are saying that there was absolutely an emotional connection, that there was an equal chance for both parties to talk. Oh, everybody's just going, yeah, all of the above. I didn't scroll down far enough. A good conversation tends to have all these things, right? And if somebody wants to unmute and just chime in on something, go for it, please. You know, I think like a great conversation. And I might answer, sorry, I've got to move. The poll is just coming up right at me here. I definitely am going to say that I'm feeling listened to. I'm feeling affirmed, like there's not a bunch of judgment happening here, that there's not a bunch of interruption happening here, like the person's letting me talk before they answer. So there's that real genuine serve and return. Barbara Miles, by the way, if anybody knows Barbara, she has a really great way of saying this. It's, I talk, you listen, you talk, I listen. So there's that serve and return. And our conversation would probably start with a greeting. And there'd probably be a rise, you know, with emotion or excitement. And then it would probably ebb. So there would be this ebb and flow, rising and falling. And it might be expressed not only through what we say, but our facial expressions, the tone of our body, our gestures. And we would probably be mirroring each other. So we would be seeing our other person that we're having our conversation with, their emotions would kind of come back with us. And we'd also be getting a lot that way too. Okay, Susan says, good conversation also requires patience. So let your person answer you. Yeah, absolutely. It's called listening, right? I think. So, you know, another thing for me is that conversations aren't always started because there's something that one person has to tell each other, like this bit of knowledge that needs imparted. Good conversations are definitely not one-sided, but many times they just raise as many questions as they answer. Maybe it's like a processing thing, right? Hey, friend who I trust, I need to just run something past you so that you can help me process it. So all these things, I think, for me anyway, go into a good conversation, or can go into a good conversation. So let's try to break this down a little bit. By the way, a bunch of what I'm talking through today is on also on a website that me and some colleagues created a couple years ago, and I'll give you a link to that later. It's called Interaction for Students Who Are Congenitally Deafblind, and it's on the Texas Deafblind website. You can find it there, but I'll also throw a link up hopefully later. So a lot of this stuff is on there. And we thought about this a lot, like what are the 5 steps if we could try to break this down. So 1 through 5, co-presence, joint attention, become the practiced, highly skilled observer. Be there, show up. Number 2, affirmation. We've got to affirm that we've heard somebody, right? Otherwise, you're like the baby, you're just kind of talking into the abyss. Name it. So how do we co-create that common language? It's like Matt and Weston, you're looking at my button, putting a name to it. The serve and return, that engagement, that talk, that I listen, I talk, you talk, I listen, back and forth. And then there's also, for good conversation, there's the introduction, there's the, hey, how are you? And then there's usually, hopefully, closure, like, see you later, it was good to talk to you. So I've got lots of little names down here at the bottom, and here you see Dr. Paul Hart. And he is also, I think, a guy everybody needs to read his stuff and know about. Dr. Hart is a brilliant guy and a wonderful guy. And so read lots of links on the Texas Deafblind website on that interaction site, by the by. But this is a quote from him. And so let's look at this kind of becoming the excellent observer thing, because to me, that's the first step. You know, we need to study the nuances of our child's attention, the body language, the posture, the expression, tension, gaze. You know, remember that a deafblind person's gaze doesn't necessarily apply to a visual gaze. Thinking back to Helen and Charlie, it can be very much a tactile bodily gaze. Maybe not even through the hands. Maybe it's, what's my foot feeling, or what is my leg up against, right? Think of where the person's attention is focused and how they're accessing that thing that draws their attention. And so as we're observing this, the first question to ask is, how is the child, the person that I'm with, accessing the world? Do they have any residual hearing or vision? And if so, how are they using it? How are they using their sense of touch? Do they like to explore with their fingers? You know, got this pen. Or is it more of an all body thing? Do they prefer to lay down when they explore and process information? Are they tactually defensive? Is there anything neurologically going on that might make them adverse to certain kinds of touch? So all these things kind of, you know, have to be thinking a lot, right? Okay, so I'm gonna video time. So I'm gonna play another video. By the way, most of these or I think all of these videos are on that website too. So if you want to go back and look at them. This is 2 little guys, they're brothers, Orion and Skylar. Orion is deaf-blind, and his older brother, Skylar, is deaf. And their mother and father are also deaf. So it's a deaf family. And this might be a little strange because you're going to hear me narrating this video. So it's not like, yeah, I don't know what this is to listen to me talk now and then also hear me narrate this. So I'm just giving you a heads up. So I'm going to go ahead and play this.
Yeah. If they find the seeds, put them on the bed. Did you get a hold of them? Yeah, she said she didn't have them. But I don't think so, but. Because I was trying to look for them and I opened up the door. Is that my car keys? Yeah, that's true.
Lana in Kansas, could you mute, please? Okay, now that we watched the video, there was a lot happening there, but I think that there was even more happening that we may not have seen. So we are going to go through this, and in some places we'll go very slowly, almost frame by frame, and see if there's anything that we may have missed. So in the beginning here, we see that Orion's laying on the bed and his big brother, Skylar, is joining him in some hand play. He's coming over and he's saying, hello. You can see that Skylar's hand is opening, offering that hello. And Orion's got his hand on Skylar's belly. And that you'll also see that Skylar has his hand on top of Orion, so that they are really in close proximity and very good tactile communication going on here. And it's really neat because these guys are brothers, and this just looks absolutely automatic for both of them. Note that Orion's left hand is checking that proximity of his brother Skylar, and Orion's right hand is starting to gesture towards the floor. Also note the look on Orion's face. You can see that Orion still has his hand on Skylar's belly, so he knows where Skylar's at. Skylar has his hand very gently around Orion's wrist or forearm, but then look at their other hands. Orion seems to be pointing down at the floor behind him off of the bed, and you see acknowledgement from Skylar. Skylar's pointing, saying, "Oh, are you talking about that that's down there on the floor?" Now, he's not verbally saying this, and he's not saying it so that Orion can see him, because remember, Orion has no vision. It's just sort of an automatic thing that people with vision do. They point. But I think it's safe to say that Orion is pointing too. So let's see what they're pointing at. Again, very slowly, we still see the proximity with their left hands touching each other. Orion can very clearly tell that Skylar is bending down to get something off the floor. Skylar is remaining in contact with Orion. Oh, you wanted your water bottle. And if you notice here, there's a little bit of a smile on Orion's face. I think it's safe to say that he feels like he was understood, that Skylar understood what he was trying to say by pointing to the floor down there and really making a request. Would you grab my water bottle off the floor because it fell a little while ago? So Orion's voice was heard and it was acknowledged. Skylar noticed this, which was a big deal. Sometimes we don't notice things when somebody can't verbally tell us what they want. Notice that they... Okay, I'm going to stop it there. It goes on for a while, but for anyone who hasn't seen that, I wonder if you picked up on Orion pointing to his water bottle that fell. These guys have a really, really tuned into each other conversation here. I mean, they're brothers and they're, you know, I'm sure, oh, they drive each other crazy and all that kind of stuff. But just a beautiful, beautiful conversation that happens so easily that I know the first time I saw it, I did not notice that. And it was only through video and being able to kind of really slow it down that I picked up on it. But Skylar, being the very present, highly skilled observer, saw it right then and there. He was on it. I wonder if anybody else has any comments about this or thoughts. And Laura, yeah, that is a really nice, you don't need to be sorry at all. That's a great comment. What in the world? Yeah, normal. What's that, right? Okay. Give it just a second here if anybody has any thoughts. Don't be afraid. You can unmute too. I would love to hear another voice talking into the abyss.
This is Megan. I just
Hi,
thought it
Megan.
was really cool how natural it was, like you were saying. And it seemed like the older brother was really giving Orion the lead with the communication. It seemed like he was letting Orion tell him what he wanted to hear, and Skylar kind of followed his lead. It didn't feel like Skylar was ever pushing him towards a certain thing. It felt very supportive that way, which was cool to see from an older brother.
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I absolutely agree with you. And it is funny because I'm sure they have their moments off camera where they're driving each other a little crazy or something, you know, but because they're brothers. But very, very nice comment. Thank you for unmuting, being brave. So somebody said, what is step one? Step one is noticing, right? Being present, being a very skilled, becoming the skilled observer. It's the first thing we've got to do. We've got to be present and we've got to notice. So step two, affirmation, is answering, responding, affirming that we've heard the other person. And so by answering, we are offering that affirmation. We're saying that, yes, I heard you, and that I'm listening, and that I see that you have something to share. And this acknowledgement, if you will, or affirmation, helps provide that sense of self, that my voice matters, it's heard, and it matters. A sense of place and value in the world. And it lets us as humans know that what we say matters and is important to others. Again, we saw, reflecting back to the still face experiment video, we saw what happened in the video when mom didn't affirm, didn't acknowledge her baby. There was high stress. And so, as an aside, I'm using the word affirmation purposefully, because affirmation does not denote judgment. Affirmation simply says, I hear you and I'm listening. And so, as we're affirming, we are not necessarily trying to interpret the meaning of the message, and instead we are letting our partner know that we're available for conversation and that we're listening. I hope that makes sense. Colette says, I noticed that the hand-under-hand contact. Orion can feel that brother is moving to, oh my God, yeah. Great observation, Colette. Absolutely. I feel very strongly that Orion knew that Skylar was bending down to pick up that water bottle. He had his hand on his stomach, right? Their communication, their hands are beautiful. Thing of beauty to watch those two. Okay, so let's watch a video. This is a friend of mine, Johanna. She is a teacher here in Texas, and this is her student, Deandri. And Deandri has some hearing. He has a moderate hearing loss, but he has no vision. And check out how Johanna affirms Deandri.
Oh, my turn. Your turn. My turn. Together. Together. Same time. Together, same time. Oh, yourself. Oh. Ready? What? Again? Oh, yes, again. Ready? Up. Up. Ready? Oh, up. Your turn. Ready? Up. Ready? It's my turn. Up.
So I love this video. I really do. I've seen it a bunch of times and I love it every time. How does Johanna let Deandri know that she hears him and that she understands him? How is she affirming him? And I don't know who, let's see, 12033 is, but I love your comments. And that person says affirmation, it is by default positive. It's unconditional exception or acceptance. Yes, absolutely. Affirmation is initiation of trust as well. Yes, this is like a joyous exchange. So what's awesome about this and what you may not know from the video is that Johanna had an agenda here. Her agenda was to come in and make hot chocolate with Deandri. However, Deandri wanted to talk about let's, blow each other's cheeks. Let's pop each other's cheeks. So Johanna, being the incredible teacher that she is, went with it. Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. And I just think that's awesome. So often we get, caught in our teacher stuff that we have to do this routine or whatever it might be. And Johanna kind of let her agenda go to the side and she followed Deandri in his topic, which is very affirming, I think. Again, I think that safe to say that Johanna is a person of high interest for Deandri. Does anybody else have any comment? And feel free again to unmute. It's beautiful. I noticed, or I mentioned that Deandri has some hearing, and I love the way that Johanna is using her verbalization, that kind of thing, to provide information, to provide context and richness to the language, right? It's big movements too. So there's some ASL happening, but what's going to be the most meaningful to Deandri? Just signing, very precisely, or kind of things like that. Such a, Janelle, great comment. Yep. Teachable moment, right? That's what we're all looking for. Okay. Step 3, name it. Again, you saw Johanna naming it a bunch of times in there. Again, she's using lots of stuff. Naming actions, naming things. So here's another video. This is yours truly, with one of my buddies. This is Nolan. And so Nolan was born premature. He has a cochlear implant in his right ear and a retinal detachment in his left eye. So notice, hopefully, that I'm in Nolan's field of vision. So my proximity, I'm close. Remember, we talked about that appropriate touch. And I'm speaking purposefully in a very low voice. I'm trying to put names to the actions and the things that we do. And I'm not only just using like a monotone voice, but I'm trying to kind of spice it up. I want some rhythm and rhyme to what I'm saying. I want some interest. And you're going to see the topic shift a bunch of times. Nolan to Chris, Chris to Nolan, and hopefully some turn taking within this, right? This is a pause. This is the first time Nolan and I ever met too. So a big difference here. Johanna and Deandri knew each other well, and this is like kind of us like getting to know each other. Nolan's hair. What about gimme 5? Gimme 5.
I'm supposed to have.
Gimme 5.
Nolan and Rita.
Yes. Oh, that was a burner.
Nolan's head. Oh, give me 5. Give me 5. Woo, yeah, baby, that was a bird. Give me 5. Oh my God, that's sugar.
Is that time?
Nolan's head. Nolan's head. Nolan's head. Ah.
Yeah. Because he's wanting this. Well, I'll keep.
Oh, give me 5.
That's it.
Oh,
I try.
oh, wait.
Sometimes it's.
Oh, smack. Oh, I know. It's hard to contain yourself.
No.
What about Chris's head? Chris's head.
Mrs. A's.
Chris's head. Ah.
That's your magazine, right? That's your magazine.
What about Nolan's head? Chris's head. Chris's head. Chris's head. What about Nolan's head? No, Nolan. What about Nolan's head? Nolan's head. Nolan's head. Nolan's head. Nolan's head.
I feel like I work out.
Chris's head. Chris's head. Chris's head. Chris's head. Nolan's head. What about? Give me 5. Give me 5.
Better? Good job.
Give me. What?
We gotta fill out the weather for all week.
Give me 5. Give me 5. Give me 5.
Right here. 3 more.
Oh yeah. Boom. Smack. I know. It is crazy. Crazy town. Where's that Connor guy?
Okay, that goes on for quite a while, but I'll stop it there and see if anybody has any thoughts or questions they'd like to share. So again, lots of, I think, emotion there, you know. I think emotion is a really critical piece to everything. It's really like what helps us make an experience memorable. You know, if everything's just kind of flat, like, I don't know if anybody's had the experience of, you know, driving home from work and you do that every day the same way, and suddenly, you know, you're home, like you don't even remember that happening. You know, it's like all of a sudden I'm in my driveway, but you know, that day that somebody like almost runs into you or something, or pulls out in front of you, it's whoa, like something extraordinary happened, something very memorable that adds emotion to it. That's the day that you remember. That's the day that you walk in and you tell your partner or whoever, like, oh my God, you can't believe what happened, right? So again, that emotional content, going back to Gunnar, like he would call it emotional tension. And what is that emotion like? And you can feel it, right? Tactually. What is that tension? Tension's not necessarily a bad thing. But what is that emotional content to the conversation? And how is that affecting, how is that helping to make that a memorable experience? Ophelia says he feels very comfortable. Yeah, I think we hit it off, right? We were buds from here afterwards. Allowing him, yes, I was trying to be very aware of, I'm not sure how well you can pick it up, but where he wanted my hand to go. And again, trying to use my vocal language to be different, to be not like a monotone. So put some emotion into it.
And I also like each of your phrases had a different tone to it. So, and use that tone consistently throughout the conversation with him.
Yes. So kind of trying to establish again that shared meaning. You know, what does "give me five" mean versus Nolan's head kind of deal? And it's kind of like we're, you know, you would say we're negotiating, we're kind of co-creating that thing, that language as we're going along. So yes, thank you for that comment. There can be so much connection with a simple activity. Absolutely. Yeah, we don't necessarily, I mean, it's a conversation, right? We don't really need a bag of tricks all the time or, you know, a piece of equipment to have a great conversation. Okay, moving along to step 4, serve and return. So I'm going to show you this video. This is a young woman named Yazdi, and this is her mom, Tish. And they are getting ready for Halloween. So they're kind of discussing the Halloween costume and what's going on. They're going to go out trick-or-treating. And Yazdi has some vision and she has some vision or hearing. I don't know what her audiological information is specifically, and I don't know what her acuities are specifically. But I'm going to go ahead and play the video. Hopefully that's still enough information to get us through.
Okay. Okay. So now. There. My turn. My turn. Oh, well. Thank you. So. That's the keep you want. Sorry. Can't put it. Message. Okay.
So, one thing that I haven't mentioned, well, and let me first say, I think it'd be easy to use any of these videos that I'm showing to kind of illustrate any of these steps, these points that I'm trying to make, right? They're all, in my opinion anyway, quite beautiful conversations. But there's also, I think, a definite rhythm and flow to each of these conversations that's a little different. If you look at, for instance, Deandri and Johanna, they're pretty fast, right? It's pretty quick back and forth. And this one with Tish and Yazdi feels slower. It feels a little easier. And there's definitely, hopefully you guys see that there's that serve and return. There's a real definite one person talking and the other listening. And then they're switching, now I'm listening and you're talking kind of thing. But as we think about that pacing to conversations and how sometimes when the emotion builds and the excitement builds, they get faster, and then they'll slow down. So really, I think it's important for us to also kind of keep in mind what is the pacing that I need to use for the person that I'm talking with, my student. Can they handle that fast flow of information, that fast back and forth? Or do I need to slow myself down a little bit and allow some processing time in between that serve and return? You saw the little guy that I was just talking to. I was really consciously trying to slow down before the next response, or letting him have some time before he responded. Yazdi and Tish are way faster than that. There's a pretty fast back and forth. However, the overall thing to me feels a little calmer and slower, easier maybe is the way to put it. So anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is just, again, as a good conversationalist, being aware of that. 12033, important message in our children's worlds. Parent is also communicating an important message to the child. There are real people behind the costumes. Yeah, that's absolutely true. You're going to have to reveal yourself, 12033. Oh, Aditi, okay. I hope I'm saying your name right. Thank you for all your wonderful comments. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share before I keep rolling here? Okay, let's look at number 5, beginnings and endings. I guess the beginning would be the hello, the introduction. And to me, there's a lot of power in hello, or hello, how are you? It's a way people show their friendliness, or that they're open to the other person, right? When we first encounter somebody, remember the picture with Helen and Charlie, right? That greeting. Is this a new friend or an old acquaintance? Either way, we usually start this conversation with a hello, an introduction. It just kind of lets the other person know that we're present and available. If you notice somebody, if you're walking down a city street or something, it's very different to pass somebody and have them give you eye contact and even just acknowledgement, versus maybe a person who's just trucking on their way and you don't get that. So all that, it's just it's an important part of that exchange, that very beginning. And then the same way with endings, with closure, it's like we all kind of need closure. The person saying goodbye, I'll see you later, it was good to see you, all that kind of thing. It's the beginning and ending to a conversation. Both are important. Don't want to leave me hanging, so to speak. So I'm gonna show you another video here, and this is, the teacher is Julie and the student is Preston, and we're gonna see Preston's getting ready to go home for the weekend. This is inside the school at the Texas School for the Blind. And like all of us, Preston can sometimes get a little anxious when, you know, we don't know something's coming up, right? Anticipation, all that stuff. So we all need to be able to have an explanation, like what is coming next, why we have date books and calendars and all that. We need to be able to make a plan. So as you're going to see, Julie is really going over like what's coming up. Preston really wants to talk about this. They're at their calendar. They're talking about going home for the weekend. And to me, so that would be the closing, right? The closing of not only there's a closing of their conversation, but it's also Preston's week at school, and then an opening for what's going to happen when he goes home. And I think Julie has a magnificent way of carrying on this conversation. So I'll try to quit talking here and just let this play. Preston has some residual hearing, no vision.
And now the best is winning. Come back, come back, come back. Come back. Which words do you want to say? Oh, you mean move my legs? Gaga. Are you thinking saying bow? Coco and be flat. Coco and be. Preston will play the piano. Oh my goodness, my timer is going off. Let's hit stop. There it is. We're playing, what were we saying? Preston's going to play the cat's piano on the what? Preston will come back to school on the bus. Preston will come back to school on the bus. What was that? At the ocean? Now what? The bus? A joke. Joke. You want a joke?
Okay, so I'm going to stop this here. It pains me to stop the video because there's so much awesomeness that keeps going on. But due to time, I'm going to stop it. But for me, it is just incredibly awesome how Julie uses this song, you know, this Queen song that we've all rocked out to all our lives, right? Is a way to have that conversation with Preston. Preston obviously loves music, and that song's so rhythmic. And check out their proximity. Check out how they're not just their hands, but Preston is very deliberate too. He's like, no, move your knees here. And so that it's a bodily thing. And through the rhythm, Julie's kind of helping to tell this story. And you can see that Preston has lots of language, but sometimes he's not real clear, and it's kind of hard to understand what he's trying to say sometimes, right? And his sign is not super clear either all the time. But through this kind of musical conversation, this context that Julie's putting it in, it's helping her to figure out what Preston's trying to say. So all of the stuff that we've been talking about with, you know, affirmation, like it's, oh my God, it's deep here, it's deep. Their proximity, their use of touch, their use of their hands, but then bodily too. Think about that, how powerful that clap is proprioceptively, the stomping of the feet proprioceptively. So all of this very deep body stuff that's happening emotionally, they're having a blast. Gosh, so much that you can talk about here, right? So I'm going to shut up, see if anybody else has anything. Yeah, Julie says, great video. It's age appropriate. Absolutely. What teenager doesn't love Queen? I mean, come on. Yeah. So anybody else have any? Yeah. She totally is like, wait, what? Like, help, let's try to figure this out, what you're trying to say. Absolutely, Ashley.
And I think it's great how she turned, you know, what was clearly an anxiety producing experience, or could have eventually morphed into a behavioral episode, into something that was fun and positive, and probably he'll remember that each time. And that could easily be like a scripted music every transition, and it you know, just kind of lends itself to such good positive behavior support.
Absolutely. Yeah. Repeat performance every Friday that Preston goes home, right? It's the going home song. The rhythm and tapping, yes, absolutely helps support and focus the language. It is the language. It is the language. It's not just the spoken word, right? It's the movement. It's the bodily thing. It's what makes sense to Preston. Okay, just to kind of go back over this real quick, and you guys keep talking like, yeah, I love the comments. Thank you. Hand under hand, absolutely. Just beautiful shared control. There's no control, right? There's just a shared back and forth with the touch, with the hands. Becky gets a great comment. I'm sure he did. In review, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, co-presence, joint attention, number 1. Number 2, affirmation. Number 3, name it. Number 4, serve and return. And then beginnings and endings. If you look at this picture, I very purposefully put this picture up. This is a colleague of mine, Robbie Bleha, and one of our students. This is Nate, and this is our trip to the bakery one day. And what's happening here is just in this snap of a moment, right? Nate had stuck his hands into this giant vat of dough, and he's looking and he's going like, oh my God, like what, you know, what is happening, right? And so Robbie, being the expert and ever-present observer that she is notices this. Okay, she's present and she's affirming like, yeah, I see that you're like wondering about your hand, like what is this goop, right? And she's naming it. She's signing dirty. And what you can't see here, because it's a photo, is they have a conversation. They have a back and forth, a serve and return about this. And believe me, there's not a lot of closure here for a while, because Nate needs to talk about this and process this day at the bakery, because it was exceptional, right? Something to remember. Okay, I'm looking at the time. And you guys, thank you so much for all your comments and thoughts, because like I said in the beginning, it's wonderful to be able to talk to so many people all over the world through Zoom, but it's also a little weird because we're not in the same room together, and we can't really have as deep of a conversation as all the time. But I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit here, because I want to play something. What this present slide is saying, though, is I call it teacherese syndrome, and I think that sometimes, and I hope this doesn't sound too off the wall, but sometimes we go away to school, to teacher school, and maybe somehow we get ruined. Something happens as we learn this thing of becoming educators, and we get so inundated with the data collecting, with the lesson plans, with the measurement, performance goals and all this stuff, that we can sometimes forget that we're working with another human being, and we need to kind of slow down and again be present. And so I'm not advocating for any teacher ever. I'd never do that, to go in unprepared or unorganized or not have a plan. But I think we also have to ask ourselves, are we coming in and are we prepared to be the expert observer and the active listener? And are we prepared to throw our agenda out that day and follow the lead of the child? Can we share ownership of whatever thing we're trying to teach? So not trying to get on a soapbox or anything, but just, I think it's, for me anyway, a very good thing to try to keep in mind. And I'm going to leave you with this. I hope everybody knows who this gentleman is. It's not John Wayne. This is a fellow named Jan van Dyke. He, if you're in the field of deaf-blindness, he's passed away recently, somewhat recently, but he was a very important guy. He is, I think it's probably safe to say, really, he's foundational to the practice of working with kids who are deaf-blind. This is from one time when he visited Texas, and he visited us many times here, but we decided that to be official, you needed a hat. So anyway, this is Jan in his cowboy hat. And I'm gonna just play a video really quick that's maybe nice to leave on. I'll have a couple other things to share at the end of this video if we have time, but.
And I use an old word, but still very, very, you see it even returning in the literature. You resonate. You resonate with another person. You look at his face, you feel it out. And that's a mutual thing. And we know now that is possible because we have neurons to do that, to resonate, called mirror neurons. And the theory of mirror neurons, and I try not to exaggerate, but the more I think about it, and the more I read about it, it has enormous impact on social well-being. Really impact on social well-being means allowing yourself to really to be with people, to watch the face, to be, let your body do the talking, let you feel, you look at the face, you feel the body, you imitate the body language, and you become, as it were, a unity with that person. Give yourself time to really encounter people. And what is it? What is a really encounter? A really encounter is that both in you a similar neurological pathway, similar neurological system. You see that when people go to a funeral condolences and give the person who's there a hand. Or we can have these encounters in a split second, looking to each other, seeing the sadness in the face, and feeling the sadness, sharing the sadness of that person, or the happiness when you go to a wedding or to the birth of a child. Is that genuine sharing, where this mirror neuron plays such an important role. And that is, can we share that with people with deafblindness? And when you feel the sadness in a person, and a person feels that you share the sadness, that's the basis of really humanity. That's human dignity.
So, again, that's Dr. Jan van Dijk, and I very much encourage anyone who doesn't know his work to check him out. He was the man. I think what might be good, Donna, and maybe you can chime in, or Jen, is maybe I could like kind of assemble kind of a reference sheet for people that we could send out to check some stuff out if they want to dig a little deeper. Send an email. I hope that's possible. I hope I'm not saying something totally crazy.
This is Jen. That's possible. Absolutely.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'm going to share a couple other things really quick with you guys. Nordic Welfare Center. Go check them out. Their website is full of really great stuff. I hope you can see this. This book is something I think anybody who works with individuals who are deaf-blind should read. It's called If You Can See It, You Can Support It, a book on tactile language. These books, there's 4 of them in this set. You can get these on Amazon. We'll give you a link. But they're communication and congenital deaf-blindness, and really good book from like starting at the beginning. And then this is pretty special that just came out not too long ago too. It's called the Tactile Working Memory Scale, and it's written by Dr. Jude Nicholas. That's also available on the Nordic Welfare site. And their stuff's free, by the by. And it's really awesome. But we'll send you links. But I just wanted to especially mention those 3 little things. And then there's also some TSBBI website stuff and things like that. So, okay. Thank you all for joining.
Chris, this is Jen. Can you share the links to some of those resources? I know we've got them too, but we can send that out in the email.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put those on a email for you guys to send out.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all I got. It's like, look at this, man. It was just on time. I've got 4:59 by Maryland time. Thanks you all for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next Tuesday, January 23rd, 3 o'clock Eastern Time.